So I originally botched the introduction of this episode, so I'm here to quickly redeem myself. But I think I was so awkward initially because I was introducing you to Emily Sheets, and I really feel like there's a lot of you that are probably already pretty familiar with Emily, and so I was definitely not doing her justice in the original recording. And so I want to do that here. But Emily is a friend of mine. She is also a very valued colleague of mine. She is a certified theta healer. And she was a very special guest at my first retreat. She actually played a leadership role there. She co hosts The Nest, which is our women's community, with me, which you'll hear us reference throughout this episode. And honestly, the longer I work with Emily and the more I get to see her in her element, just the more impressed with her I am, honestly. She has such vast knowledge. She has such a light when she teaches and when she connects with people. And I've just been like so blown away by her and her work. And I feel so just thankful to have her as a partner on this journey, which can be lonely at times. So to have her as somebody that I get to actually partner with and we have our own little team going feels so good and so fun to me. But also, I just really admire the way that she shows up to her work. And so today we're talking about perfectionism, which, as you'll hear, Emily does identify as a perfectionist on many levels. And so we're talking about that today, and we're talking about how do you actually navigate perfectionism, because I do think that a lot of us hold perfectionist traits that maybe we haven't always identified as that because they might be a little underlying. But today we're talking about how you can actually take those traits and make them your strengths. And Emily talks about how she no longer considers herself a perfectionist. She really strives for mastery. And you can just see that in the way that she works. She is actually currently getting her 18th Theta Healing certification. So she is definitely committed to her craft. And so we're talking about the way that this shows up in our lives, how we can navigate it with a little more grace and forgiveness for ourselves, but also the mindset shift that helped Emily take on this role of mastery rather than perfectionism. So we are just jumping right in. Also, I do need to mention that Emily has been on my podcast multiple times at this point. So if you do like this conversation, please look in the show notes because I am going to link or at least reference the other episodes that she is on with me so that you can listen to more if you want to get in on more of these conversations that we're having. I hope you enjoy.
This is Sarah Heredia, and you are listening to the Freely You podcast. Our time together is meant to inspire you to think bigger and empower you to live your life in a way that makes you proud to be you. I believe that the only box you should fit in is the one that you build for yourself, and I'm here to help you lay the foundation. My journey has taught me that we all deserve to create our own definition of success while meeting ourselves with love and a playful curiosity. My goal is to provide practical tools and fresh perspectives so you can rewrite your story, start living your life on purpose, and ultimately become more freely you.
You've expressed to me, Emily, that you do identify or previously identified as a perfectionist. Now I would say you're a recovering perfectionist. So tell
Totally.
me a little bit about that. Tell me your journey with perfectionism.
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, this has literally been what I would call an operating system for me for as long as I can remember. Like gosh, I don't know when it started in my life. Probably when I started to be able to talk and walk, like really, really deeply embedded into who I was. And actually, from my perspective, it's a very genetic pattern. That comes from my father's side, actually both of my family, both sides of my family have perfectionist tendencies in various ways. So it has been a pattern that has influenced a large percentage of my life. And now through the healing work that I do, I am moving out of perfectionism as it's like a control mechanism. And we can get into that later, but it's a way for me to feel in control of my life, right? And there's so many things that this pattern, the way it has served me in my life, it's been a way for me to have high self-esteem when I'm achieving things, when I feel like I'm being perfect. But on the flip side of that, it has also been a way that I have absolutely torn myself to shreds on the inside when I felt imperfect. And so the more I heal from this pattern, the more I have learned to keep, there's some good things, right? There are good things. I like my work ethic that comes from that pattern. I like that I do have high standards. And I like putting out quality work, so there's some really great things that have come from this pattern too. And I think, you know, sometimes when we talk about like breaking patterns and habits and healing and growth and all of that stuff, we can sometimes only look at the bad parts, and it's like, wow, there's actually some good things that come from some of our dysfunctional patterns. So it's about me, like moving out of that pattern for me has just been a process of refining the good things, the blessings that came out of the pattern, the things in my personality that I actually like, that came from that pattern, while letting go of the negative things that are really unsupportive, unhealthy for me, including a really harsh inner critic, and moving into what I call mastery. Like, I don't think it's actually a bad thing to have a goal to, yeah, have high standards, to want to be really good at something, to want to achieve things. But it's more about the energy, the method behind that, the way we treat ourselves through that process. So I'm still very much a person that likes to be masterful in their life and master their craft and their skills and my work, specifically, but in a way that I can love myself through. So that's kind of been my journey with perfectionism, and it's ever unfolding. So I don't know if you call myself a recovering perfectionist or something else, but I just now say I'm a person that's devoted to mastering things in my life that I want to be a master of, things I want to be good at, and treat myself nicely along the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, write that one down. Treat myself nicely along the way. So thank you so much for sharing all that. And there is so much I relate to as you were speaking. And I think that's the irony about this conversation for me, is that as we were discussing, this episode and what we wanted to hit on. So Emily and I run the Nest together, which is a women's community, and we've talked a lot about people being scared to be seen and being like, it's unsettling to show up in a space maybe where you don't know people and to just be yourself, imperfections that all and all. And so that's kind of where this conversation stemmed from. And as I started reflecting on myself, I was like, I really don't identify as a perfectionist. I've never like labeled myself that. But the thing that you were describing that really hit home for me is the control piece, and like needing to have control over the way you're showing up, over your outcomes, over kind of everything. For me, kind of everything. And so that's where I see it come out. And as I was like diving a little deeper, I'm like, well, Sarah, a ton of your clients have perfectionist tendencies. Like, this is something that a lot of the people I work with struggle with. And so I'm like, law of attraction, I generally do attract people that have similar qualities as me. So I had to take a look in the mirror, and there definitely is perfectionism there. It's just, it doesn't come across as that way, because I am like, I think I show here on this podcast, like I'm okay with making mistakes. I know that that's, especially for me and my design, like that's a huge part of the way that I learn. That is part of like who I'm meant to be, is like trial by fire type situations. But underneath the surface, there is this desire for it to look a certain way. I do say all the time, I have very high standards for myself. And, the other thing that you were describing that I relate to so much is that being hard on yourself piece. And so for me, it's never been about perfectionism. It's always been about the being hard on yourself and like the self-worth to it's okay to make a mistake and you're still good enough regardless of if you make mistakes. And that's something I've had to do a lot of work on. So that's just kind of my relationship with perfectionism, that I've kind of come to the realization that, okay, there is something here for me too. And so I guess that's an invitation to you as you listen to this episode. Like, maybe the title didn't speak to you immediately, but maybe just get curious as we're talking if you can see some of this in yourself, because I think that is the thing with perfectionism, and that is what I want to dive into with you, Emily, is it can be really sneaky. Like, we can, say things like, I hold myself to a high standard, or I'm a high achiever, um things like that, but we don't necessarily, like, perfectionist puts off like a negative tone, right? That nothing is good enough unless it's 110%. You can be a perfectionist and not and be okay making mistakes, but maybe it is just that it's that overachiever in you. It's the high standards you hold for yourself. So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, so it's interesting you bring up human design. One of my, um, if you dive a little deeper into human design and you look at the gene keys, which I'm not an expert in either, but I've looked at my gene keys chart, which is, I think, just another take on human design. One of my key gates or areas in my life is this gate of mastery. So it's very much hardwired in me to look at how things can improve, look how to make things better, want to have high standards, want to do high quality things to achieve. Like, that's very hardwired in my nature. But I think like the big distinction that I think that has helped me the most is like, what is the energy behind that, right? Like, what is the intention going into that? Is the high standards so that I can feel accepted by others? Because I want to say, like, my journey through healing perfectionism. And if anybody's listening and you're like, I feel shame for being a perfectionist, like, there's no shame. Let's talk about that in a second. But one of the core wounds of a perfectionist is the inability to accept oneself fully. Like, acceptance is the antidote in a lot of cases to perfectionism. There's a lot of other things, say, when we're trying to control things, we need safety and other elements with that. But acceptance of oneself is literally the magic wand for a perfectionist. So if you're doing something out of like, I need to prove that I'm good enough. I want to get a high standard. I will have high standards. I want to achieve high things because I'm afraid who I am without that. I mean, gosh, people can go listen to the other episodes to get a full background of my story. But after my accident, it literally was like I had built so much of my identity and my personality and my self-worth and my self-esteem and my confidence on my achievements that when I got sick, when I couldn't function anymore and I had anxiety and panic, like, that whole thing was divinely wiped away from me. And I've had to rebuild myself, not having those achievements that to rest my hat on. Like, there were like probably like 2 years where I couldn't even function at a level where I was able to do anything productive that what I would have considered was productive previously. And so it like was horrible for me on so many levels because I was like in a full-on identity crisis and faced with this huge inner critic of like like when I wasn't achieving things, when I wasn't hitting my standards, when I wasn't hitting my goal, when I wasn't doing anything of value that I thought was of value besides taking care of myself, which was not a value of mine in that time. Um Yeah, it did not feel good to be me in my body. I was really not happy with myself. I was very just upset with the world, the circumstances, and my current state of being. And so I think it just matters tremendously the energy behind it and like your intention behind it. So previously, my intention behind it was like, yeah, I need to achieve to have my self-worth. I need to have achieved to have self-esteem, to be okay with myself, to feel good about myself. So if you take all that stuff away, can you still be okay with yourself? Can you still love yourself? Can you still feel like you're worthy of good things in life? And that is like one of many things that I've learned in healing from my accident is just like really like, because that's not to me, that's not true love. That's not true worthiness. That's not true self-esteem. When you're having to place it outside of you on an achievement, on looking a certain way, on showing up a certain way. So that's to me the difference between I have high standards and I'm doing that because I love myself and I want to challenge myself and I want to see what I can create in this world that's the best that I can create. I want to live my best life. Totally different energy than I have to do this. Otherwise, I'm afraid of who I am, or I will just feel terrible about myself. I won't have any self-worth. People are going to judge me, like fear-based control stuff. That's the difference between those two. And that's just been a huge lesson for me the last 5 to 6 years. It's been a core lesson. And so like I started this little comment with is the acceptance piece is really to me that the way out of shifting that energy from being one that's like controlling and to one that is expansive and can be supportive in my life.
Mhm. I think that is the biggest downfall. And one thing that you said in the beginning that I want to highlight because it was, I don't remember how you said it, but it was a beautiful point. It's like you're not necessarily a recovering perfectionist because it is a part of you, right? You've just shifted the way that you view it, the way that you show up for it, the energy behind it, what you're going to be a stand for at this point in your life, versus what kind of were your standards previously. And so it's not about, this isn't like, oh, well, if you're dealing with perfectionism, like we got to talk about this so that we can fix you. That's not the conversation that we're having. The conversation that we're having is that a lot of us have these tendencies and just based on what we've said, even this far, you can see how this quality can play out in your life in so many different ways. So if it's impacting you in a negative way, if you're seeing that it is coming from a place of lack, fear, not enoughness, then there needs to be a shift there. And I couldn't agree with you more that the acceptance is such a big piece. And that's anytime we're looking at what we would consider a negative quality about ourselves or a weakness, we are made like, cheesy as it sounds, there is no lightness without dark. Like it's good and bad, yin and yang. Like that is law. And so it's not about looking at these things as I wish I wasn't like this, because it can be a strength of yours too, but in what way is it showing up in your life that it's not serving you right now? And I think for me, what I found, especially in my business, is what you're describing is that being fixated on the outcome. Like, if I don't sell this thing out, if I don't book a client this week, if I don't whatever, that is a reflection of me, of my worth, of what I'm capable of. And that's not the case. And as long as I sit in that, the outcome will reflect that. So this is like something that I think is really important to point out, is that if you're recognizing in this conversation that maybe you have some of those qualities and you're not happy with your reality, you're not happy with your outcome, it's exactly what Emily's talking about, is the energy behind it. Well, well, how are you showing up for this thing, this goal that you have, this standard that you have for yourself? How are you actually showing up for that? Is it from a place of I have to, or else I'm not good enough, or I have to show them? Like, what is your motivation behind the outcome? And that makes a big difference. It's not that you can't have a goal that you're reaching towards, but your worth, your value, all of that cannot be directly attached to that goal. And that's where the acceptance piece comes into play. Can you love yourself without achieving that thing? Can you love yourself when you fall flat on your face? Can you love yourself when you don't follow through? Can you love yourself when you fall back into old patterns? That's where the acceptance becomes so key, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's easy for us to walk around and say we accept ourselves fully when things are going right, but to me, that's not real acceptance because it is about how you treat the parts of yourself that you feel like weren't acceptable. So many people that struggle with perfectionist tendencies even um, were probably taught and reinforced early on through basic, most of us were exposed to a basic system of like reward and punishment. Good behavior was rewarded, bad behavior was punished. That was just traditional, parenting. And so if oh gosh, I have so much I want to say about this. I actually feel like most people have perfectionist tendencies. So let's destigmatize it. But it doesn't always come out as perfection. Some people rebel against the perfection, and some people internalize that and say, yes, this is what I'm going to do now because I want to appease. And so all perfection, this is something that came to me a while back, but it's like it blew my mind that all perfectionists are to a degree people pleasers. Like they're one and the same. They're very much the same energy. You can be a people pleaser, not be a perfectionist, but if you're a perfectionist, you probably have people pleasing because that's part of that coping mechanism is really what it is, right? You as a child had needs that you wanted to have met. You wanted your parents' love, you wanted your parents' attention, you probably really loved it when your parents were happy. And so that's where, these seeds of perfectionism are born. So they're not these like really terrible things. So I just feel called to destigmatize that for a second. And there is also nothing wrong with, again, wanting to create amazing big things in this world that require higher standards, right? If you want to do something new in this world, create something new, you really want to have a big impact on people's lives, like it's going to require a higher standard than the norm of what other people want. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But what I want to say is like we all kind of have that like high vibe version of our shadow patterns and our low vibe versions of our shadow patterns. So it's not necessarily even like shaming yourself for wanting to control, right? Because that's what perfectionism is. It's a control mechanism, like I talked about, and it started when you were a kid, most likely, probably genetically, but like you wanted your parents' love. So it's like, oh, I'll just do X, Y, and Z. I'll do what they asked me to do. Then I'll get the love. And so that was a way you could kind of control your reality to receive more love rather than the punishment. Rather than just being like, well, I'm just going to let my parents be upset. That's actually really traumatizing to a lot of kids to be like, I'm just going to allow the other person to have their emotions, which is what we have to relearn as adults when we're letting go of this need to be perfect or show up in a way that um, has a good reaction from other people. So, yeah, there's just so much to it. But I just really feel like if you identify at all with this conversation, that it's like this is your sign to drop the shame around it because it's really nothing to be ashamed of. And most people have perfectionist patterns. Like I said, some people like rebel against it, and some people also go into like the freeze state with it too, where they just they like if you have a problem with procrastination, a lot of people that procrastinate is because they're afraid of making mistakes. So perfectionism doesn't always mean that I am a high achiever. Like it's so funny this is coming up, but my laundry is my nemesis, right? For the long forever, like my whole life, my laundry has just been a mess. Like my closet has been a mess. And people would be like, there's no way you're a perfectionist because you're not like OCD when it comes to cleaning and you're not OCD when it comes to your like closet. Previously, not anymore, but previously it actually just gave me so much anxiety thinking about like the high standard I had for myself when it came to cleaning my house and organizing my closet that I would just avoid it completely. So perfectionism doesn't always look perfect. It can be like I'm totally shut down on the inside because I am like petrified with the amount of work or the effort or like just the outcome of this situation. And so it can sometimes look like procrastination, self-sabotage, and things like that. So I just felt called to like bring that side of it up too, because it's not always like I miss perfect. It's like my life is a mess, complete mess. And it's because I have this perfectionism pattern running beneath, and I'm so overwhelmed that I can't even get myself to do anything.
That's the thing. Like, we could literally list all the things like, okay, maybe you don't relate to being a perfectionist, but do you have trouble making decisions? Do you find yourself overthinking? Do you find yourself feeling overwhelmed because you don't know like every single detail and how to do it just precisely? And so it feels scary to start, or it feels too big. And like, it's just, it can be so sneaky. And it is that reward system. And like, as you were speaking, I kind of had this light bulb moment where it's like, so I do think that for a majority of people listening to this podcast, this before gentle parenting was like all the rage, we were just raised, there was a high expectation, right? And how you showed up and how you spoke to people, you used your manners, like that was just kind of like where the bar was. And when I think about my childhood, it was like there was never that expectation. Like I didn't feel like it was like you have to get straight A's. Now I did a lot because I like to, but it my parents didn't put that pressure on me. But there was a lot of pressure and reward for just being polite and well spoken and well mannered. And like so even that, it's like it is those people pleasing tendencies that we get at a young age because we're taught the reward system quickly, and that often develops us into who we are. It creates our habits, it creates our patterns, because we're always seeking a reward. So if
Mhm.
you were rewarded for whether it was your high achievements or just the way that you showed up, like that probably carries with you, that probably has carried with you to your adult life. And you'll see that come up, whether it's in your career and your relationships.
Yeah, and I just like want to add on to that too, because it's not, again, the reward system itself isn't necessarily bad or wrong or teaching you this horrible thing. It's just that when I just feel like, this is just things, the concept of like self-love and what happens when you don't meet the reward is equally as important. And that I feel like is what is the difference, when I say the energy behind it, when it's one of fear, when it's one of like, I can't be my authentic self. I have to be somebody I don't want to be. I can't say no to people when I want to say no. I have to look perfect, be perfect, whatever. It's literally the fear of what happens when you don't meet the reward, going back to the childhood, that really solidifies it as a control mechanism, as a coping mechanism. You know, it's only been recently when we start to talk about like having emotional intelligence, especially when you're raising the next generation and making sure that kids are not just given attention and love when they're achieving, when they have reward, like when they've done something well, that you can like provide that love and that compassion even when they've maybe done something that is not okay with you. You know, you can have boundaries, you can have standards, but it's also about like reparenting ourselves. And if you have kids, I don't have kids, so I'm not gonna like speak on it, but you know, I think the way you treat yourself when you don't meet the outcome you want is where the work really is, and coming out of like perfectionism as a not so great pattern, as a harmful pattern, and just installing high standards and you know wanting the best for yourself or wanting the best for your kids and wanting them to have a good life and be like you know nice people in society. Like there's nothing wrong with those things, but it's like I feel like in our generation growing up, parents didn't really have the awareness of like, well, but the punishment side of when you don't meet my expectations and the anger and hatred and things that happen to us as kids, maybe like physical punishment, if you got spanked, like that can really help enforce the fear mechanism that drives, I feel like, the harmful side of perfectionism.
With the people pleasing and that the need to be accepted, the need to be liked, all of that, that is always hindering us from being our authentic selves, right? Like if we have to be a chameleon and change the way we're showing up in every situation in our life or with a different group of people, or we are one way in our career and we're one way at home and we're one way with this group of friends, you are literally blocking yourself and everybody around you from seeing the truest version of you. And not only is that exhausting, it's also not allowing you to embrace those imperfections and to embrace like, yes, I have these people pleasing qualities. Yes, I have these perfectionist tendencies, but these are also things that serve me, or this is also something that I'm okay with because I've learned how to navigate it and I can see the good and I can see the bad. And you know, I think that's the ultimate goal. It's not shifting or like not identifying this anymore. It's like you're saying, like now your focus is mastery, you know. And I think for me going into this conversation, for me it's so much about that acceptance, like, and that's been a huge thing I've had to overcome. It's like acceptance no matter what the outcome is, you know, no matter what the reality is.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about how perfectionism can also impact our decision making tools, because I think a lot of us have we tend to overthink. Um, we tend to self-doubt, or maybe not, or we feel disconnected from our intuition. And I just want to talk a little bit about how that can tie into
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism. I think it goes back to what you were saying about the energy behind it, the fear, and you know, like if you are constantly feel if you are so worried about not getting it right, about it not looking the way that it's supposed to, about not achieving this thing, then of course you're going to hesitate. Of course there's going to be doubt. Of course there's going to be overthinking, going round and round trying to make decisions, because you're so, again, tied to the end result, to the outcome, to how it has to look. And you hold yourself to this high standard, and you're taking like your need to be human out of it. Like we have to make mistakes to learn. That's part of it, you know? And I think that that's the misconception. It's like, well, if I'm the best I can be, and if I am, you know, quote unquote perfect, then I can achieve all the things I want. And I'm going to get there faster because I'm going to be focused. I'm going to be motivated. And sometimes it can actually be the thing that's hindering us, because in our minds, it has to look a certain way before we'll even take the path, before we'll even take the first step. And so giving yourself a little grace in that area can help you with your decision-making tools, can help you with your overthinking, with your self-doubt, all of it. Like it's all connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like just coming through right now. I've never really considered this before, but it makes so much sense that, when you can direct that energy of like wanting the best for yourself, wanting high standards to the process of creating the outcome, the journey, whatever it is that you're wanting to do, and have that be the focus rather than the outcome itself. I feel like things will just fall into place a lot easier for most people than if you're like directing your energy towards the outcome and like saying my standard is based on the outcome. If you can just move away from that and have your standards be like how you show up in the journey, how you treat yourself in the journey, the kind of like effort you put towards the goal, but without like detachment from the outcome. I think that's where magic and miracles come from. So I just felt called to say that. Because yeah, I mean, I just want to share like anytime you're really in that over analyzing, overthinking, spinning your wheels with decision, confusion, feeling lost, like those are all kind of like variations of that same, what I would call the same energy. Like if you're just lost and confused, you're obviously really in it. But like overthinking, over analyzing is like a gradient, like a not as entrenched in that confusion, lost energy. But it's that is a key that you are, I want to just say, like placing your power outside of yourself. And that's really what perfectionism, when you boil it down, is like placing your power to love yourself, to accept yourself, to own your worthiness, to own your desires, your dreams, what you want to create in your life, your ability to direct your energy to the things you want to create. That's your power in this world. But when we outsource that to other people based on like our performance, our outcomes in life, that's where it becomes detrimental. And when we're overthinking can be a sign of that you're in that, right? Because you're overthinking it because you're afraid to make a mistake. I mean, that is, I think it's not always the case. It can be a safety thing, like what you're not feeling safe to move forward. But a lot of times it's a fear of making the wrong move, doing something wrong, doing something that's going to result in a bad outcome. So I think that's just one key way that we know that we're allowing our decisions. That's another way we have power in this world, is to make decisions from what's best for us. And if we're placing that decision making based on the outcome, based on what other people will think, based on if somebody's going to be upset with you or not, that's all ways we outsource our true power. So, um, for me, like moving out of the harmful pattern of perfectionism is just reclaiming my power and reclaiming standards and boundaries and expectations for how I conduct myself in my life without like with letting go of the outcome, which is really, really hard, right? And it's not to say that you can't want an outcome in your life. Like, of course, you can want an outcome in your life. You can have a specific thing that you're trying to work towards, but don't outsource your power even to that outcome, right? That if you don't hit that outcome or it doesn't happen in the time frame that you want it, or it doesn't happen exactly the way you want it to, then you make up that story about yourself of like how you didn't do good enough, how you didn't put forward the effort. And so this really comes back to being able to regulate your nervous system too. Because when you're in that, like, again, I'm keep coming back to this, like perfectionism was a way to control when we don't feel safe or we feel like we're gonna like lose a something very dear to us, like the love or an acceptance from other people. If we don't have that within ourselves, like that is going to trigger the F out of your nervous system. You know what I mean? Like that is a very scary thing to you, if your body and your nervous system, not necessarily your conscious mind. So being able to like ground yourself and detach from those outcomes, it's a very hard thing to do, but it really is the path forward to being in your power and creating things that you want in your life with more ease. At least that's what I've found in my life.
Yeah. Well, I'll say like a standard that I've set for myself in the last couple of years, it's to not allow those negative thought patterns to like take over, and that was something that I was so conditioned to do. It was wild when I like pinpointed that I was having so much negative self-talk. I did not realize like how constant it was. And it was like just side comments in my head, like, you idiot, like, oh, you fucked that up, just like mean talk. Like, I would not talk to a friend like that. I would not talk to a child like that. And so it's not, if you have those tendencies where you're hard on yourself, where you do expect perfection, you have high standards, pour that energy into creating a standard that's going to serve you, right? So
Mm.
now for me, the
Yes.
standard is not like you can't fuck up because trust me, we're still making mistakes right and left over here. The difference is that I don't accept that talk anymore. Like, that is unacceptable. I have such a high standard
Mhm.
for the way that I speak to myself, and showing myself love and grace through my mistakes, which is also something that I was not doing well in the past either. So
Mhm.
again, it's not these qualities that you have. You can learn to use them to your advantage, but you have to shift your focus. And again, it's the energy behind it, right? It's like, this is a positive, loving, supportive energy that I choose to give myself every single day, rather than the energy of, you're not enough, that wasn't perfect, and I hope it looks better for you next week. Like,
Yeah.
it's a huge difference.
Totally. I think you said it better than I could have said it. Just this idea of like what I was saying, like treating yourself, have your standard be how you treat yourself on the journey. Like that's the perfect example of like I have a high standard that I don't talk negatively to myself. Um and yeah, I think that's just so profound and that can help so many people in this world. Because I think there's just so many people that have varying degrees of this, like really like the way they're controlling their own authentic self, right? It's like we're trying to like mold ourselves into a box when we're just really this like bright white, like expansive light that can't fit into a box. But we try to do that to get our needs met. And so the more you can like be that inner parent to yourself and say like, nope, this we don't tolerate this in our lives right now, like that is so key. And there was one other thing I wanted to say about that. It's escaping me right now, but oh no, I do know. I just want to say if you've made it this far in the conversation, I want you to know that that your soul specifically chose to experience patterns of perfectionism because you are here to do like incredible, amazing things. And I've kind of alluded to that earlier in the conversation, but it's like the perfectionism stuff is only harmful when you allow it to harm yourself and when you can direct it towards what you want to create in your life and the things that you are here to do and the only thing that you are capable of, the gifts that you are here to bring through and share with the world, like it is going to be a driving force for a magnet to the things that you want. Um, and just creating absolute miracles in your life. So it's about learning to work with that energy more than anything. So we've been talking this whole time. It's not necessarily like a bad thing. There's good thing. There's a high vibe version of it and there's a low vibe version of it. And it's part of your personality for a reason. And it's about learning to use that energy in a way that supports you and serves you and feels just good for you as you walk this journey in life.
Yeah. The word that is like coming to mind is pressure, like the amount of pressure that is completely self-induced that we put on
Mm.
ourselves. Like nobody else is worried about, we hold ourselves to such a high standard that nothing else will do. And it's literally a pressure that only we can put on ourselves. And so when we say we're a high achiever, when we claim, okay, I identify as a perfectionist, there's pressure associated with that, right? Because, and I think that might be my hesitation to like say I'm a perfectionist, because what if I say I'm a perfectionist and then like things aren't perfect? Then I'm not, then I'm not, that's not my status, right? Like it's like this pressure that we put on ourselves, even to admit that we're a perfectionist, even to say that like
Mm.
that we're a high achiever. It's like that in itself comes with like this amount of pressure. And when we're putting pressure on ourselves, when we're constantly under pressure, you were talking about the nervous system, like, yeah, we're not going to feel safe in our body. We're not going to have control over our mind. Like, we are literally like, we are physically, mentally, emotionally, all the things like stopping ourselves in our tracks because of the amount we can't move. There's no wiggle room. When the reality
Mhm.
is, we're here, it's life's messy. That's how it is. Like there's no
Mhm.
way around it. Life is meant to be messy. And if you are putting this pressure on yourself that it can't be or that it shouldn't be, you're literally setting just such an unrealistic expectation and holding yourself in the same place, essentially, not allowing
Yeah.
yourself to move forward or to grow.
I mean, it's like, can you have perfection? Can you like use the energy of perfectionism, the drive to be better, to be the best version of yourself? Can you apply that to how much you can accept all parts of yourself? So again, it's just about how you use that energy. If you use that energy of like, I'm going to try to be the best at loving myself. Okay, that's pretty cool. That could actually do some really amazing things for yourself. And what I see though, like this is also like new stuff. I've never really learned this, just coming through right now of like the difference between using that perfection energy to like create amazing things in the world and to harm yourself is like where you direct it. But like so when you're in that kind of the low vibe version again, but no shame because we've all been there. There's no shame about this. It's just awareness of like I'm in that low vibe version of perfectionism where I'm hard on myself and I'm really upset that I didn't show up perfectly or I didn't have that conversation go the way I wanted to. Like all these little things that we have like that pop up is like I should have done that differently, blah 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 blah. Um can you like so the low vibe version of perfectionism is when you turn that energy inward on yourself as a harmful force instead of like using outward to expand yourself outward and to use that energy to create outwardly. I think that's just a huge difference. I don't know that everybody will understand what I'm saying, but this is like very new for me that helps me. It's like when you turn that inwards on yourself in a harsh way, like that's when it becomes I think a problem for most people instead of like turning it outwards into what you want to create, what you want to be in the world and using that as like a powerhouse energy to create like the life of your dreams. I mean, it can be used that way. So it comes down to your decisions and your expectations, how you use that and the intention behind it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like that. I was thinking about just being disciplined in that way. It's like even when we do want more discipline in our lives or we're trying to get a result. And so, like, let's take New Year's as an example. New Year's happens and it's like overnight, we're gonna implement all these things and we're gonna shift all these things and we're gonna show up completely differently. And it's like a forced discipline. You're not doing it because you necessarily want to because it feels good, because you're so excited about what you're creating. You're doing it from a place of like lack. This hasn't been working. We got to shift everything. And I, yeah, I just think that like recognizing when you're getting into that mentality of like, am I doing this from a place of love and desire and creation and abundance? Or am I doing this with so much pressure and rigidness and like has to be a certain way and force? They're very different. And even like
Mhm.
looking at whatever you're moving towards right now as you're listening to this episode, like your goals, what get clear on that. Like, what is the energy behind it? Is it a have to? Is it a force? Is it a I'm not there yet? Or is it like we're getting there? This feels good. It feels expansive. Like, I'm going to lead myself through it. I'm going to forgive. I'm going to dream so big, and then I'm going to forgive myself when I fuck it up. Like, and I think that forgiveness is another big word that
Mm,
it's like
yeah.
being willing to, and I think that is like a lot of, that's how the perfectionism comes through for me. It's this just being so rigid. Like, you either passed or failed. There's no in between. So can you be gentle with yourself and forgive yourself when you make a mistake and recognize that that's part of the process?
Hmm. Yeah. I hadn't thought about forgiveness, but yeah, forgiveness and acceptance, I think are, two, they're like partner energies. Like they, accept being able to accept something and accept yourself is the ability to also forgive. I think you can't have one without the other. So I think that's so important. And then even the perfectionist can have, um, like standards that we place around when can we actually even forgive ourselves? What has to be done? Like, do you have to like make sure that the other person that maybe you like hurt somebody, or like again, you had a conversation that didn't go the way you wanted it to, and then you're like beating yourself up on the inside and being like, man, I shouldn't have blown up at that person, or maybe I might let my emotions get the best of me, or I was really dysregulated in my nervous system and I didn't ask for what I needed, and that hurt somebody that I love and I care about. And so can you forgive yourself for that? Well, what are the conditions that you place on yourself? Is it that you have to like remedy that situation perfectly? Like, do you have to be perfect even in that to get forgiveness? Because this is literally how the pattern will work sometimes. Of it's just like it can permeate everything for your benefit or to your detriment. And it is just it's a process of learning yourself. And just know that the only person that places conditions on when you can forgive yourself is yourself. So you get to create that standard for yourself. And maybe you can be generous with that and say that I can forgive myself for anything, no matter how big, how bad it made me feel, how bad it made someone else feel. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just forgiveness is so huge. And I do feel called to like, not to like bring up a totally different topic, but religion is coming up very strongly for me because I think a lot of us had religious backgrounds, or we had people in our families that were religious. And that can also reinforce this perfectionism pattern, especially when we talk about forgiveness and, not wanting to go to hell. That was a big fear I think a lot of parents used to make sure that we were good people, right? Again, going back to that reward system, but these are the things where it's like I don't know. I just feel called to say this. I'm not like a super religious person. If you are, that's amazing. But that like God always, all the time, whatever you call that energy, source, spirit, creator, forgives everything. Like the only person that's separating you from that forgiveness is yourself, your own beliefs, the way you are treating yourself. So I don't know. I just felt really called to say that for somebody out there.
No, thank you for saying no, amen. And thank you for saying that, because I do think yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to open this, but It's like it has to be somebody out there needed to hear that message. I don't know who it is, but you know who you are, and you can forgive yourself right now.
Yeah, because that one runs so deep and it goes so far back in history, and it is so
Yeah.
much that organized religion. And so, yes, the God, source, energy, spirit, love, creator, whatever, it is all, it is forgiveness. It is you can do no wrong. It is you are perfect as you are. And that is the real truth. Unfortunately, organized religion taught us something different.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave it there. But that
People
is,
have plenty to think about now. Like,
yeah.
wow, okay.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I hope that if you've been listening to this conversation and if you've related to some of these things we've been talking about, like Emily said, it is a beautiful thing. It is your purpose, is that is part of your purpose, is to do something with this quality that you have. And it's all about the way that you're going to go about it. Is it going to be the standard that's unattainable for you, that you're always going to be reaching for and you're never going to be able to achieve? Or can you accept yourself as the messy human that you came here to be, with a lot to accomplish in your life, and show yourself love and acceptance and grace and forgiveness along the way? I think. Anything to add to that, Emily?
No, I just love that. And the more you can do that, the more you can like have that center, that core within yourself that you're like, I am lovable no matter what. I am worthy no matter what. I accept myself no matter what. Like that, it really is a game changer when it comes to how you like it's just it's a freeing thing. It frees up your energy from all those pressures, the obligations to show up certain ways. And it really is the key to unlocking like the gifts, I think, of the energy of perfectionism.
Yeah. Yes. The gifts. I love it.
It
Beautiful.
is. It's a gift. It can like there is no mistake. Like even you experiencing perfectionism is no mistake. It is by perfect design. So know that.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. It's all about what you do with it. So
Mhm.
thank you all for being here for this conversation. Thank you, Emily. I always love having you as a guest here. If y'all don't know, Emily and I are co-hosting a women's group, The Nest. It's happening now. We're actually going to do a short little podcast separately from this one to tell you more about that and dive into it. But if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you want to go back and listen to the other episodes with Emily, and you like our vibe, you like what we're talking about, you've loved this conversation, there's so much more of this in The Nest. So that invitation is open for you always. And I just want to be sure that you're aware of that.
You guys, thank you so much for being here today. You actually have no idea just how much it means to me. If you enjoyed this episode or believe in my mission, can you do me a solid and leave me a review, follow, or share this podcast? It would be so greatly appreciated. Also, if you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram at freely Sarah Heredia. Sending you so much love, and I'll be talking to you soon.